Tonight,
Israel, like every country, has the right to defend itself.
violence between Hamas and Israel continues to take lives. Plus, why former Vice President Mike Pence blames the Biden administration for what's happening in the Middle East. And
it's been such a blessing to fulfill what the Lord told me I would do.
CBN News says goodbye to a prolific and pioneering reporter. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Truce efforts showing no sign of working in the Middle East. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
Good evening. I'm John Jessup. Rockets from Hamas taking aim at Israel Tuesday, the 9th straight day of violence between Israeli forces and the terror group.
And with no end in sight, the number of deaths continues to climb. Rockets fired from Gaza took the lives of 2 plant workers from Thailand, Israeli officials said. Meanwhile, Israel continues to target Hamas in the Gaza Strip, deploying airstrikes aimed at the terror group. Today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, quote, Hamas and Islamic Jihad received a blow they did not expect. The U.S. says it is using diplomacy to help bring an end to the conflict.
Our goal remains to bring the current cycle of violence to an end as quickly as possible, and then bring the parties back to the work of building lasting stability, which the Palestinian and Israeli people and people everywhere deserve.
Well, most of the media is focused on the rocket fire from Gaza and Israel's military response. On the ground, however, some fear an internal strife threatens to tear Israel apart.
CBN's Chris Mitchell reports on the growing violence between Arab and Jewish Israelis throughout the country.
Disturbances and rioting in Israel's major cities is the worst in decades.
What we saw on the streets is something that was reminding us of the days of the pogroms in 1948, in 1927, in 1936, in 1967. That is unacceptable. We want the Israeli-Arab culture, we want the Israeli-Arab communities to calm the situation down.
Israel police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld says authorities have used only non-lethal methods to control the violence.
It's come from the Israeli-Arab community who have attacked police officers, burnt vehicles. Tens of vehicles of civilians have also been burnt in the different cities.
Rosenfeld tells CBN News the incidents began in Jerusalem's Old City during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
But unfortunately, local residents, local communities, local individuals, the majority of them youngsters, have taken to the streets.
In the initial violence, Arab rioters attacked Jews and synagogues. The violence also prompted Jewish self-defense and revenge attacks, such as this one caught live on Israeli television.
The majority of those individuals being individuals with criminal records were taking to the street and defending themselves as well. In the majority of situations, unfortunately, there were 1 or 2 incidents that took place where they beat up people in the streets, which is absolutely unacceptable.
Meanwhile, Israel's President Reuven Rivlin brought together Muslim, Christian, and Jewish religious leaders and educators from the northern Israeli mixed city of Akko.
This is home to us all, and we protect our home. Not with clubs and knives, not with stones and firearms that sow destruction and ruin, but first and foremost by maintaining law and order. We had 3 awful days here, and we are still traumatized. Our town is a special place, a place where we live and where coexistence is not just a slogan. The people here have worked very hard, invested a great deal in stopping the violence. As the rabbi said, Akko is a place where you feel the calm and the coexistence.
Arrests are ongoing, and Rosenfeld hopes the situation calms down so police can decrease the number of officers on the ground. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Certainly wish we could see more of that coexistence. Well, former Vice President Mike Pence is laying the blame for the current conflict in the Middle East squarely on President Biden. In a new op-ed for the conservative National Review, Pence highlights the progress made during the time he was vice president while slamming Biden's agenda, saying, quote, Israel is enduring the worst outbreak of violence in at least 7 years, a direct result of the weakness shown by the Biden administration from its first day in office, adding that many Americans witnessing the recent bloodshed in Israel are perplexed by how quickly violence erupted after years of calm, and concluding that the answer is that President Biden and congressional Democrats have abandoned unambiguous support for our ally Israel, emboldened our enemies, and turned their back on the policy that yielded historic peace deals in the Middle East.
And we're joined now by Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, so, in the last few months, we've seen very little of the former vice president. The last time we talked about him here, you acknowledged that he's lost a lot of favor with the Trump base. Does speaking out now on the issue of Israel help make some amends?
Well, it depends how you define some. It doesn't make amends. Probably doesn't even make some amends. I mean, there's a bunch of frustration inside the deep red. That's the key part. The deep red of the MAGA base that is not happy with Mike Pence. And op-eds like this aren't going to make too much of a difference. I mean, they're done. They're done with Mike Pence. That's the sense, not only the sense that I'm getting, but talking to folks in that deep red MAGA world. They say he had his chance on January 6th to do something, to at least punt it back to the legislatures, and he wouldn't do that. And it's going to be a problem for him going forward. So, this op-ed hit all the right notes. It's the same Mike Pence we've known for a very long time, but it's a different world post-January 6th.
David, Biden, of course, President Biden was in Dearborn, Michigan, a place that's known for its heavy Arab American population. There were protests there earlier today, and it really exposed the rift among Democrats. Biden, along with Schumer and Pelosi, back Israel's right to defend itself, they say, and are pushing for ceasefire. The more progressive wing, though, David, wants a more hardline approach. So how does the president navigate this and thread the needle?
Well, it's going to be very difficult, John. But look, I think what the president at this point would need to do is take a page from his own playbook strategy. And what do I mean by that? Look, the White House has said consistently that they're looking at the polls and that the American people support this, the American people support that, and that's why they're going to go forward with their economic plans. It's the same thing on the Middle East. If you look at the polling in America, you will see that the majority of Americans support Israel. I mean, you've got Ilhan Omar and AOC and Bernie Sanders. They are on the far left. They're the outliers. So if Biden is going to go with the outliers on this, and I understand it's the energy in his party from the progressive standpoint, the far progressive standpoint, but it's not going to play well in middle America. It just won't. Because once again, if they want to go with the strategy that they say themselves works, which is look at the polls and the majority of Americans support X, Y, and Z, well, the majority of Americans don't support anti-Semitism rhetoric coming from the far left. So it would probably be a good idea, at least politically, for him to distance himself from that. That's the way out for Biden. Whether or not he'll take it is a whole different matter.
Yeah. David, this is President Biden's first major international crisis. Talk about how much is riding on his ability here to handle this from a leadership standpoint, but also here at home and abroad.
Well, it's definitely important because it's the first one, and of course it's the Middle East, and it also, unfortunately for Biden, goes to a lot of his weaknesses on this issue. What do I mean by that? When you start to increase the funding, or I should say restart the funding to the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and everybody over there in the Gaza Strip, which is exactly what this administration did in the first 100 days, that's going to open yourself up to criticism. So this is tough for the Biden administration. But look, let's also be honest. The Biden administration has made it pretty clear. They didn't want anything to do with the Middle East. They were hoping to kind of just ride that out and just kind of play along on the sidelines. Their obvious focus was China and a lot more with that economic policy. But in terms of the Middle East, they wanted it to kind of go by the wayside. Unfortunately for them, and unfortunately, more importantly for Israel and the innocent lives that are being lost in the Gaza and in Israel, it hasn't happened that way.
All right, CBN's David Brody, thank you as always.
Thanks, David.
Yep, you bet.
Well, to the fight against COVID-19, U.S. health officials say we're winning the war on the virus. Today, citing dramatic declines in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. But they're also warning the job is not done, urging a strategic age group to get the vaccine. CBN's Heather Sells reports.
For the first time since the pandemic began, COVID cases are down in all 50 states.
Hospital admissions are down. Deaths are down.
Today, good news from top U.S. health officials regarding the current direction of the pandemic. Monday saw 17,724 new cases, the lowest daily total since last June. And the 7-day average for deaths is down to 546 per day, the lowest since March of 2020. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky sees the U.S. on a path leading out of the pandemic. That's because more than 6 in 10 people have received at least one dose of the vaccine. And more than 4 million adolescents are completely vaccinated. Still, authorities are pushing for more, warning that more than 3 million kids under 17 have contracted COVID and that hospitalizations are trending younger.
A vaccine may feel unnecessary. You feel healthy. You know people who've had COVID and they're doing all right.
White House COVID advisor Andy Slavitt says there's much to learn about long-term effects and that his own son still suffers from his bout with COVID.
He's young and fit and in the prime of his life. But 6 months later, he still suffers from tachycardia, shortness of breath, and ongoing and frequent flu-like symptoms. His hands are cold to the touch.
Slavitt says young people should consider getting the vaccine as an act of citizenship, and that with free Lyft and Uber rides and walk-in sites, it's never been easier.
You can text your zip code to 438-829. That's 438-829.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thank you, Heather. Coming up, COVID-related hate crimes on the rise, and lawmakers in Washington are working to fight racist attacks.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Welcome back. A bill addressing a dramatic rise in anti-Asian hate crimes is on its way to the president's desk. The Senate overwhelmingly passed the legislation last month, and the House tonight following suit.
And National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke has more on the bill and how it aims to address the rise in those hate crimes.
The bill instructs the Justice Department to make reviewing COVID-19 related hate crimes a priority. It also provides local law enforcement with more resources to respond to violent attacks.
The violence that we've seen directed against our Asian American brothers and sisters shocks the conscience.
One national report shows hate crimes against Asian Americans up over 160% in major cities. In addition to verbal and physical assaults, victims report a lack of support from bystanders.
And there is more people wanting to film on their phones than step in. The situation shouldn't have escalated to the point where he could physically touch me at all.
While meeting with the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus last week, Vice President Harris made clear the administration would not turn a blind eye.
A harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us, and we will stand united in fighting against these injustices.
Lawmakers expect continued bipartisan support for the bill, and Biden has indicated he'll sign it when it makes it to his desk. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. Well, when communities are targeted for elimination, it's called genocide. Most often, genocides affect religious minorities.
And the U.S. has recently made several designations of genocide, which experts say can help hurting communities feel supported. CBN's Jennifer Wishon explains.
In a bold move, the Biden administration recently designated atrocities committed against Armenians in 1915 as genocide. This on the heels of another genocide designation against China for the communist government's treatment of Uyghur Muslims there today. So what does this all mean? For more on this, we're joined by USCIRF chairwoman Anirima Bhargava. Thank you so much for being with us. Tell us, what does a genocide designation mean? How do you get there, and what action comes with that?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. The 1948 Genocide Convention defined genocide when specific acts are committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So this is when the effort is really to take an entire community off the map.
Anyone who's been watching this broadcast has heard a lot about what Uyghurs are facing in China and the recent designations by both the Trump and the Biden administrations of genocide there. But it's been a while since the U.S. has made that designation. Can you give us some history there?
Sure. So the United States has actually made designations that states have engaged in genocide, including in Bosnia, in Rwanda, in Iraq, in Darfur, and then areas that are under the control of ISIS, and then most recently in December in China. Of course, this past April, President Biden took a long-awaited step and recognized the Armenian genocide, which had taken place in 1915.
And for the rest of the world, that seems like a long time, but I know for these communities, that's their heritage. Those were their grandparents and their great-grandparents, and they live with that every day. Can you talk about personally what it means to some of these communities to have the world, and especially a superpower like the United States, to give them that designation?
These communities that have faced persecution and extraordinary violence, tortures, killings, rapes, in mass form, they have experienced unheard of trauma and horror. And to then have a situation in which they're silenced, or that history is erased, or it's not acknowledged, is at best a re-traumatization.
I'm always struck by the fact that in 2021, we are still talking about genocide that is occurring right now. As we've mentioned, Uyghurs in China. Are there other parts of the world that are moving towards a possible designation of genocide right now?
So unfortunately, Jennifer, there are parts of the world in which we are already at a place in which genocide is occurring, and that's certainly with regards to the Rohingya, who have been pushed out of Burma violently, where we saw the kind of mass rape and torture and killings in Burma as that displacement occurred. Now, actually 7 years ago, we saw with the Yazidis in Iraq and Syria, again, the displacement, the torture, the killing, the rape of a community with the intent to again, take them off the map entirely by ISIS and others.
Chairwoman Bhargava, thank you for drawing attention to this important issue. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for having me.
Thank you both. Well, up next, a look back at the career of one of the hardest working journalists at CBN News. More Faith Nation right after this.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy?
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times best-selling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain. Get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
In 1986, senior Washington correspondent Paul Strand began his tenure here at CBN News. 35 years later, he is hanging up his hat.
Paul's retirement after more than 3 decades of faithful service comes as a bittersweet news for all of his colleagues here at CBN. Abigail Robertson brings us this look back at his incredible career and impact.
When Paul Strand was just 17 years old, the Lord told him he'd work at a place called CBN News, which didn't even exist at the time, and forge a new kind of journalism. As we know, that prophecy was fulfilled, and for 35 years now, Strand has shared encouraging stories of where God's moving around the world.
It's been such a blessing to fulfill what the Lord told me I would do. I can't think of a better way to live your life.
They are so grateful that we liberated them, and they're so relieved now that Saddam is out of there.
It was a long, hard slog to get up to the 8,400-foot-high rim of the volcano.
People were waving their hands saying they had received those healings.
And biking doesn't just have to be about you and getting to work. It's also fun recreational activity for the entire family.
The last great awakening in America started right here in New York City. You can fit your faith and science together.
You hear about the mission field, you think third world, Africa. But what about this?
Most of the people here at the March for Life are younger folks.
I could see the smoke billowing out of the Pentagon, and I realized, my gosh, this is so real. There it is.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Paul says 13 years after God spoke to him about CBN News, his phone rang.
A guy calls me from CBN News, and he says, Paul Strand, your moment of destiny is here. Come work at CBN News. So I didn't even have to go to them. They came to me.
He didn't just find a career at CBN.
If you'll commit to forever,
you'll get there together.
When I met Susan Burns, first date, it was like, I can't live without this person. This is the one. We've been married for 33 years, and what's great is to have a wife that worked in CBN, who was a producer herself. She understood. She understood the long hours, the many trips we have to do. That was a glorious thing, to be married to somebody who so much knows exactly what you're doing and what it matters to your heart, because she had the same ministry herself.
Paul started as a CBN News assignment editor. Then during the 1996 Democratic Convention, God used unusual circumstances to open a new door.
And all the reporters were basically knocked out and sick as could be, so I had to pick up the microphone and off I went, started to do the stories throughout the convention, and it never turned back. CBN said, okay, he's done it, let him stay.
Since then, Paul has been one of the ministry's most prolific storytellers.
Why would a camel be hanging out on Capitol Hill?
Constantly searching for stories with hope behind our headlines.
Just after a while, the stories I was doing, when people would ask me what my beat is, I said, what's God doing in the earth?
We look down next to our artillery trucks, and we can see boom, 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 boom.
Throughout his career, Paul's covered war zones and shared amazing testimonies.
Joy when I think about what you've done for me.
No matter what may come our way, as long as we got the Lord, we can be all right.
Around D.C., he's known as the biking reporter.
You drivers pay about $11,000 a year for your transportation. Bicyclists, $350 a year.
Although just a few years ago, a bike accident left him with a concussion and 2 brain bleeds.
What got me to come back was I said, Satan's trying so hard to knock me out. I must have my best days ahead.
8 months later, Paul was back on the job and his bike, seeking the Lord's direction for his coverage.
I've been impressed that it seems like the Lord has really been on those stories for the last 4 or 5 years, to where every one of them I say, wow, this ministers. There's an angle in here that can change people's lives if they're really listening to this.
In 2019, Paul did a story on a group who rescues women from human trafficking.
Girl after girl at this facility was getting saved. We did a story about this. I felt so good about it.
While it aired, this happened.
A woman who had just been thrown into a motel room by her pimp and told, "Don't you leave this room." So she turns the TV on and that story played. And that woman called the Hope Center Indy. They came and rescued her. And her life was entirely changed because she saw this story on the 700 Club.
For Paul, news is ministry.
That's been the main thing to me, is just this idea that I helped change some lives, even as a journalist, that you don't have to be a pastor, you don't have to be a minister. God can work right on through you, and he can work right on through the deeds of your hands.
And he's relied on his hope in the Lord to see him through the good stories and the bad.
We've got this whole different thing in our lives where we know this Savior, we know this Lord, and if we can just get him to seep on through those stories, it really does change lives.
As for what's next for Paul Strand, for now he's going to take some well-deserved time off while remaining open to go wherever God wants to lead him. Reporting from Virginia, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to cbn.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Finally tonight, one of the countries hit hardest by the pandemic is still facing COVID restrictions.
But one artist is choosing to focus on the positive, using her art to bring light and hope to a town in Italy. The light installation spells out the upbeat message in 6 languages in the Italian city of Bressanone.
Very cool. All right, that does it for us. Have a great night.